Today we will discuss topics from Chapter 44 and the third part of Chapter 45 of Parashara Hora Shastra, titled Miracle of the States, Raja Yoga, Dance, and the Wrath of Mars. Stepping right into the mindset of a researcher, we're going to uncover the precise mathematical mechanics ancient sages used to decode human destiny. We will start with the exact formulas dictating physical mortality, and then we'll transition into the complex avastathas, the planetary states that literally reveal the hidden psychological behavior of the cosmos.
So let's get right into Chapter 44, focusing on the third house and mortality.
Looking directly at the original Sanskrit slokas right here for Chapter 44, verses 25 through 31, we see Parashara establishing a foundational link between celestial bodies in the third house and lethal outcomes. The text doesn't deal in vague philosophy here. It provides a stark diagnostic fragmentation, assigning a literal physical exit strategy based entirely on elemental nature. When we translate these verses into their simple English meaning, we uncover a remarkably clear, undeniable matrix of mortality. Consider the differences. If the sun is positioned here with strength, it brings death through royal or legal punishment, which we'd understand today as severe systemic authority. The moon, however, causes death through lung disorders, specifically tuberculosis. Mars, our warrior planet, naturally brings the end via wounds, fire, or weapons. And if the third house is occupied or aspected by Saturn or Rahu, the text points straight to poison, fatal falls, or severe confinement.
Continuing the translation, we find the remaining indicators. Mercury's presence is associated with fatal fevers. Jupiter brings about demise through physical swellings or tumors. Venus is linked to urinary diseases. And, crucially, a convergence of multiple planets indicates systemic failure from numerous concurrent diseases. What you should really take away from this is that the third house acts as a diagnostic lens. The specific nature of the planet translates directly into the physiological cause of the final breath.
Moving right along to Chapter 45, the Miracle of the States.
We are transitioning now from the physical finality of the third house into some highly technical territory, the miracle of the states. In the opening verses of Chapter 45, the sage breaks down the fundamental Baladi states. This is a brilliant mathematical division of a standard 30-degree astrological sign used to calculate a planet's literal age, and therefore its capacity to project power.
The calculation method here is incredibly precise. Just imagine a 30-degree sign sliced into 5 equal 6-degree increments. For odd signs, like Aries or Gemini, you calculate the states sequentially. 0 to 6 degrees is the infant state. 6 to 12 is youthful. 12 to 18 is adolescent. 18 to 24 is advanced or old, and 24 to 30 degrees is in extremis, basically the dead state. But here is the massive catch you have to watch out for. This precise mathematical order is entirely reversed for even signs like Taurus or Cancer, meaning a planet at just 2 degrees in Taurus is actually considered dead, not an infant.
And this brilliantly illustrates the practical significance of these mathematical degrees. A planet's age dictates its output. An infant planet, it yields only 1/4 of its results. A youthful one yields half. But that adolescent planet, sitting right in those prime middle degrees, yields its full absolute potential. However, a planet in the advanced state offers negligible results. And one in extremist, the dead state, is mathematically neutralized, offering nil results completely regardless of how well it might be placed by house.
Building upon age, verse 5 introduces the Jagratati states. This adds a fantastic philosophical and spatial layer to the mathematics. A planet is considered awakened or alert when it sits in its own sign or exaltation. It's dreaming when placed in the sign of a friend or a neutral space, and it is fully sleeping when placed in an enemy's sign or in debilitation. A sleeping planet, much like a sleeping person, simply cannot actively protect or promote the affairs of the house it commands. Now, let's dive into verses 11 through 18, which detail the 6 complex states. Having established a planet's age and state of wakefulness, Parashara now introduces 6 highly complex planetary states driven entirely by the nuances of conjunctions and aspects. These specific shlokas decode the Lajita, Garvita, Kshudita, Trushita, Mudita, and Shobita states. And these aren't just poetic names, right? They are the exact formulas required to understand the behavioral psychology of the celestial bodies. Let's break down the calculation for each one.
Looking at the fragmentation of the text, the first complex state is Legitavasta, which translates to a state of being ashamed. This is calculated exclusively when a planet sits in the 5th house, the house of intellect, creation, and merit, but is heavily burdened by association with malefic entities like Rahu, Ketu, the Sun, Saturn, or Mars. The philosophical meaning here is deep. The planet feels suppressed and ashamed, utterly unable to freely express its natural intellect and grace due to the harsh company it's forced to keep.
Conversely, we have Garvatavasta, the proud state. This one is calculated simply but powerfully. It's the state achieved when a planet is placed in its exaltation sign or its Mula Trikona. The practical significance of a proud planet is that it operates at absolute peak philosophical and astrological confidence. It is sovereign, unbothered, and fully capable of delivering those high-status results.
Next is the Kshudatavasta, or hungry state. This requires a strict calculation of hostility in a chart. A planet becomes mathematically starved when it sits in an enemy sign or is conjunct an enemy, or feels the hostile aspect of an enemy, or is trapped in the restrictive, cold grip of Saturn. A hungry planet is desperately seeking resources it simply does not have, leading to deep frustration and delay in the areas of life it represents.
Now notice the poetic irony of the true Kshudatavasta. The literal English meaning is thirsty, describing a fascinating astrological paradox. The calculation dictates that the planet must be sitting in a watery sign, like Cancer, Scorpio, or Pisces. Yet despite being surrounded by metaphorical water, it's scorched by a malefic aspect without a single drop of benefic relief. It's the classic archetype of being stranded in an ocean but having not a drop to drink. To balance this out, the text provides the Mudita Vasta, which is the delighted state. Mathematically, it's achieved entirely through positive reinforcement. A planet is delighted when it's sitting comfortably in a friendly sign, while simultaneously absorbing the expansive, benefic rays of Jupiter or other natural benefics. This state signifies contentment, growth, and natural ease in manifesting positive outcomes.
Finally, we look at the Kshobatavasta, which calculates planetary wrath and agitation. This is an incredibly volatile state triggered primarily by combustion, so being conjunct too closely with the scorching rays of the sun, combined with hostile enemy aspects. The planet is literally agitated into a state of wrath, destabilizing the house it sits in and the houses it rules, much like an angry person totally disrupting a household.
Which leads us to the ultimate consequence of these complex states. Parashara states that any house occupied by a hungry or wrathful planet will be systematically destroyed. For us as researchers, this means the psychological instability of the planet, its starvation or fury, inevitably ruins the material stability of that specific area of life.
And this brings us to a really profound mathematical paradox to consider as we conclude our explainer today. When applying these exact diagrams and calculations to a live chart, how do we reconcile conflicting states? What happens when a planet is structurally exalted and proud by its sign placement, yet simultaneously agitated into wrath by the hostile aspects of its celestial neighbors? How does the researcher weigh structural brilliance against environmental destruction? It's a fascinating question, and one that absolutely requires the deepest mastery of Parashara's miracle of the states.